Women of power is our topic today, and we're going to look at two women that you may or may not know as well as some of the others from the Tanakh, from the Bible. We're going to be looking at Yael and Devorah. Deborah and Jael, I guess, is the usual English writing, but Yael and Devorah are what I'm going to be calling them throughout. But before we can get to their story, we have to review what we know about a woman's role in the Bible, what we think about how the women characters act, how they engage in the world. And so, did that work? It worked. Okay, so when we think about a woman's role, we often think to the story of Sarah and Abraham. When Abraham is out greeting the guests that come, Sarah is in the tent. She is preparing the food. She is listening, eavesdropping almost, to the conversation about the prophecy of Isaac to be born. When we think of Rachel and Leah, we see them fighting in order to have children, competing for the affection of their husband, trying to come out as top wife in the polygamous arrangement. We see Miriam later, there as the sister of Moses, as a song leader at the edge of the sea, somebody who, again, seems as almost an adjunct to the male lead. And Zipporah, whose name you may not even remember, Zipporah, the wife of Moses, well, her big claim to fame is that she's the wife of Moses, and that she once did a quick impromptu circumcision that helped prevent Moses from being in trouble with God. She gets left behind. But when we look at what a woman's role actually is, we realize that Sarah, although she was in the tent, Sarah was deciding the destiny of her family. It is Sarah that says Hagar must leave with Ishmael, for Ishmael is behaving improperly with her son Isaac. When we look at Rachel and Leah, they may have their disagreements about who is the favorite one within the family, but it is they that are deciding how to overcome the rivalry of siblings that has plagued our entire people since the beginning of our family history. When we think about Miriam, she did a lot more than just provide musical accompaniment. It was Miriam's quick thinking and clear wits that saved her brother, put him into the hands of Pharaoh's daughter, and made sure that he would be in good position to be raised safely. And it was also later in their relationship that she was willing to call him into account. She was a little wrong on that, but she was still willing to stand up to her brother. And Zipporah, as I mentioned, she is not just an accessory to Moses. She stepped in and did something that Moses himself had failed to do. And you can go back and read your book of Exodus to get more about that. So then we have to figure out, what are women's roles then? Well, we can sort of divide them into classically soft roles and hard roles. And I'm not talking about the roles that are in your teeth. I'm talking about the roles that women play. So in the soft stereotype, women serve, women help, women implement, that the men take the lead and the women are there in the supporting role. That was sort of our first slide, thinking about women maybe off the top of our head. But women also fulfill very hard roles, powerful roles. Women direct. They make decisions. They are deciding what their family will do. Women lead their household. Women set the parameters and set the stage. But there is still a feeling that women have limitations in this classical view. So on the one hand, we think that women still, throughout all of this discussion, they don't fight. After all, when we have the census, which we discussed in this last week's parashah of Ki Tisa, we hear that it is men that are being counted because they are the ones who will go off to battle. They are the ones to go off to war. Women instead are those that are being defended by the war. Women are the ones who are being protected from the ravages of war. As the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 said very clearly, civilians, particularly women and children, account for the vast majority of those adversely affected by armed conflict, including as refugees and internally displaced persons, and increasingly are targeted by combatant and armed elements. This is a very fancy way of modern bureaucracy saying that when war happens, women get hurt most. That you may think that a bit ironic, that after all it was the men in the ancient world with the shield and spear, but having a shield and spear meant you had a fighting chance. If you lacked the shield and spear, or if you had run off into the hills having been defeated in battles, it was your town, your village, your farm that was overrun by the people you had been fighting, And it was the women and often the children of those towns and farms and small hamlets that would bear the actual brunt of the murderous rage of your enemies. And you would often live as a man to fight another day. Women also are thought to still fight, but they do it with words throughout the Bible. They do it with words, especially between themselves. We already talked about the rivalry between Rachel and Leah, but we also see the rivalry between Hannah and Peninnah. Again, a rivalry for husbands' affections, a rivalry for the birth of children, the rivalry for their status within the family. We often think of women as being more behind-the-scenes leaders, leading through subterfuge, persuasion, beguiling. This is from a movie about Jezebel, who was said to have led King Ahab of the northern kingdom astray into worshiping false gods and supporting the prophets of Baal. And Jezebel did that not because she had the direct power, but because she was able to wrap her husband around her finger. She was able to influence him. The later wives of Solomon were said to do the same. These are typical positions of power, which still seem very curtailed compared to the power of a man. When King David had an enemy, he went and he fought him. He fought Goliath directly. But Jezebel, Hannah, all the other women of the Bible, you might think, they are confined, they are limited in their use of power. Whether it be soft or hard, both versions of female power, you might be thinking, are less than the male forms of power throughout the stories. But not always. And that's where we come to today. Actually, not usually, but I'm going to have to convince you of that. But not always do women play these roles. And in fact, it's the ones who break the roles that become the stuff of legend. You may know this brave Israeli woman. This is the new Wonder Woman movie that is coming out, and I can see from the crowd that you guys aren't paying attention to your latest teasers and trailers. This is actually an Israeli model, an actress who is playing Wonder Woman coming out this summer. And again, Wonder Woman was considered a superhero because she did things that women didn't do. She broke the mold. You might be a bit more familiar with this woman, Joan of Arc, who was also famous for breaking the mold. She got burned at the stake for that, which also goes to show how society sometimes views women who break the mold. So in the back of your mind as we go through our two women today, think about whether or not they are breaking the mold in a way that is being condemned by their society, or are they actually exhibiting the power that women are supposed to have and is something that we have simply overlooked. Too often when we read through the Bible, we read through it of our Victorian eyes, the eyes that have been shaded by American Puritan ideas and by American ideas of women being the homemaker only, of locked in the home so that the single man could go off and work. And that was not true of biblical women, nor was that true of any woman until the late 1800s and then the 20th century. Women were side by side with men in almost all endeavors, because if you didn't do that, you and your family starved. And the idea of having a woman who could be kept at home, that was a luxury item. That was a sign of status for modern men to show that they had made it so well that they didn't have to let their wife work. Of course, we know that not letting her work had other detriments to her. All right, so let's get down to our story itself, the story of Devorah and Yael. It is the year 1100 BCE, about. The Bible doesn't give us exact dates, but we can work backwards from known dates and work out. It's about the year 1100 BCE. This is long after Moses and Joshua have led our people out of Egypt and led them into the land of Israel, and they have conquered the land, mostly. The land has been divided among the different tribes, and this lovely color map makes it look like everything is said and done. You can see Judah's got that, and Benjamin has that, and da-da-da-da-da-da. It's all very nice and neat. But in point of fact, our enemies are still in strongholds throughout these different parts. The Canaanites and other nations that had taken over the land while we had been held as slaves in Egypt, they are living in strongholds of city-states all throughout this land. And so we're not out of the woods yet. And our story is going to focus on one in particular. and that is King Yavin, who lives in Hatzor. This is an aerial photo of Hatzor, the archaeological site. It has been located in the north of Israel, and a lot of excavation has been done. We have a very good idea that this was indeed a mighty city. The walls encompassed some 200 acres. The walls were very strong, very thick, massive gatehouses. This would have been a huge fortress from which the Canaanite king Yavin would have been able to rule the whole northern area of Israel and able to inflict great harm upon our people who were setting up their farms and living in that area. In particular, he had chariots, specifically iron chariots. And for those of you who remember back to your good old Western civilization classes, you'll know that the transition between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age was a very important point. And armies that had already mastered the technology of iron were usually able to pretty much run right over the top of those who were still relying on bronze. And Yavin had iron in abundance. He had 900 iron chariots, and he was oppressing the children of Israel for 20 years. Which leads us to Devorah. So if you'll look at the handout, this is the story of Devorah. It's a 2-chapter story, but don't let it fool you. It has a lot to say. So if you'll read along with me, and this translation comes from Everett Fox, a beautiful translator of both the Torah and the early prophets. He is working on the later prophets still, and he tried to capture the flavor of the Hebrew as best he could in the English, because sometimes the English can feel a little flat and dry, and the Hebrew in this story in particular is far from it. So I'll do my best to render it into words. But the children of Israel again did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and Ehud was dead. That was the previous leader of the Israelites. So the Lord sold them into the hand of Yavin, king of Canaan, who reigned as king in Hatzor. The commander of his armed forces was Sisera. Now he sat enthroned at Haroshet Hagoyim. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, for he had 900 chariots, and he had been oppressing the children of Israel strongly for 20 years. Now Devorah was a prophet, the wife of Lapidot. She was judging Israel at that time. She was sitting, as a judge, under the palm of Devorah, between Ramah and Beit El, in the highlands of Ephraim, and the children of Israel would come up to her for judgment. So that's our introduction to the character of Devorah. So what do we now know about her? Who is she from this short little phrase? She's the wife of somebody, and a judge, and a prophet. Right? So the wife, we're not going to go into so much detail because we never hear about Mr. Lapidot ever again. Or Mr. Devorah, I suppose we might want to call him. And so instead we're going to focus on her main roles. She is a prophet. What is a prophet? A prophet, someone who has stilled their spirit so that it can be in harmony with God, so that it can hear God above their own thoughts, above their own tumultuous emotions. A prophet can perceive God's will in the world, can see how the world moves and where it should move to be in harmony with God, and because of that, they can then guide themselves and others. That is sort of the textbook definition of what a prophet is in the ancient world. I know that we tend to think of prophets just as somebody who predicts the future. This is the Hebrew concept of a prophet, somebody who can feel God, see God's ways, and lead others in those ways. And Devorah is one of them. If we read from the next sentence in verse 6, she sent and called for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kedesh in Naphtali, and she said to him, "Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, charged you? Go, deploy at Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men from the children of Naphtali and from the children of Zebulun. I will deploy against you at Wadi Kishon Sisera, the commander of Yavin's forces, along with his charity and his throng, and I will give him into your hand." That's a commanding person. This is somebody who is telling him, go up to the mountain, here's where you take your army, this is what you do, you need 10,000 guys, and I will array the enemy host against you. Now you might think that's not exactly reassuring. After all, 10,000 guys against 900 chariots, those aren't very good odds, because there's more than just 900 chariots. There would be the rest of the Canaanite army. And so Barak says, Barak said to her, if you go with me, I will go. But if you do not go with me, I will not go. Barak's response? How would you characterize it? A little cowardly, maybe? I don't know about coward, maybe unsure. Unsure of himself. Maybe he feels that the victory will only come if Devorah is with him as some sort of human good luck charm.
Or if the fact that he doesn't really totally believe that she can do all this.
Perhaps it's a test. Well, sure, you're telling me and my men to go up to the mountain.
So if she goes along, he knows that whatever's supposed to happen, she's going to be in it too.
Right. Is this just a suggestion, or do you, Devorah, really believe it too? Are you willing to stand up there on that mountain and face the 900 chariots alongside of us? Because if you're not willing to stand there, then maybe you're not so sure of this prophecy as you make it sound. And if you're not so sure, then I'm not so sure, and our men aren't going to be so sure, and why bother doing it? So he definitely seems a little hesitant. And her response is beautiful. Right? She said, I will go. Yes, go with you. But it will not be your glory on the way that you are going. Rather, into the hand of a woman the Lord will sell Sisera. And Devorah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. Warning? Punishment? What's this? There will be no glory for you on this way. And God will sell the commander into a woman's hand. Is this her way of rebuking Barak? Well, remember, it sounds a little bit like it, but remember, in Hebrew poetry and prophecy, rebuke is intended to change behavior. This is past the point of changing his behavior. She's going with him. That's done. She's simply letting him know what is going to happen now. What is going to happen now is that Sisera and Yavin will fall. Much was clear from her prophecy. But what is made more clear now is that when he falls, he will fall to a woman. Who's the woman? It sounds like, at the moment, like it's Devorah, doesn't it? Right? It's like, fine, if I go with you, but I'm getting all the credit. That's not the way it's going to work out. So, just a little foreshadowing here. What's that? Spoiler alert. Remember, we're talking about two women today. Spoiler alert. It's not going to be Devorah who gets the glory directly in terms of capturing the enemy. We'll get to that in just a moment. First, we've got to catch up on our story. So Barak called up Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh. Those are two of the different tribes of Israel. And behind him came up 10,000 men, while Devorah came up with them. Now Heber the Kenite had parted from the Kenites, from the children of Hovav, Moses' father-in-law. He had spread his tent as far as the oak of Tsananim, which is near Kadesh. That's a little bit of an interruption, yes? Yes, you have to trust the author here, capital A, that is laying the groundwork for what we need to know for later in the story. So there's this other guy named Heber. He comes from a tribe that is distantly connected to the Israelites through Moses' father-in-law, but who is being camped in the area. We'll come back to him and his tribe later. But let's get back to the Canaanites now. And Sisera was told that Barak, son of Abinon, had come up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera summoned all his chariotry, 900 iron chariots, and all the fighting people who were with him, from Haroshet to the nations of from Haroshet Goyim, the Haroshet of the nations, to Wadi Kishon. So he takes the bait. Sisera comes right up out to war. And after all, why not? He has the superior force, and he has to. The great problem with being in a giant fortress city was that although you were safe behind your walls, your enemy could ravage the countryside. And that meant that if somebody would array an army against you, you had to choose. Do we sit behind our walls and wait for them to destroy everything? Or do we come out from behind our walls and fight them? In this case, for Sisera, no-brainer. We've got all the chariots. We've got the advantage. We have more people. Let's go out. We'll fight. We'll crush these upstart Israelites. Not going to go that way. Spoiler. Okay, so Devorah said to Barak, "Arise, for this is the day that the Lord is giving Sisera into your hand. Does not the Lord go out before you?" So Barak came down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men behind him. Who's going before the Israelites? The Lord. This is the point that Devorah was trying to make earlier. That when she said that the Canaanites were going to be delivered over to us, it wasn't her that was doing it. It was God, which meant her location, whether she was with them or not, immaterial. It's God's presence with us that makes the difference. And she's trying to really drive that home. And the Lord panicked Sisera and all the chariotry and all the camp with the mouth of the sword before Barak. And Sisera got down from the chariot and fled on foot. Now Barak was pursuing after the chariotry and after the camp, as far as Harosheth of the nations, while all the camp of Sisera fell by the mouth of the sword. Not even one was left. Now Sisera had fled on foot to the tent of Yael, the wife of Hever the Kenite. Told you he was important. For there was peace between Yavin, king of Hatzor, and the house of Hever the Kenite. All right, so what happens in the battle? We don't get a lot of detail, do we? Very typical of biblical accounts of war. We don't go in for the whole Iliad and Odyssey descriptions of the shining shields and the spears glinting in the light and the cut and thrust and Ajax and Achilles and Hector and all. No. We come down off the mountain to meet them in battle. Their chariots are thrown into a panic. Everything falls apart on the Canaanite side as they go and become afraid of what's happening, and we attack and destroy them. Let's move on with the story. That's the way the Bible tells battle scenes. It's not really Hollywood stuff, but it gets back to the important stuff, because the battle is a foregone conclusion. Right? It's not about the individual skill of individual warriors. What it's about is the fact that God is on our side. And therefore, we don't need to know about how the bronze armor gleams in the sunlight. We just need to know God is with us, we're going to win. Look, we won, hooray. One detail does get at it, however. After Barak has sent their camp into panic and begun to slaughter the people, he pursues the camp, even though Sisera, the commander, has fled in a different direction. That was his mistake. Barak should have been pursuing the enemy, not pursuing the camp. The camp was the site of the loot and the booty. That was where you found your spoils from war. And so it was natural that he and the army would focus on it. But unfortunately, this is why Deborah was in charge rather than him. He kind of lost sight of the prize, if you will. Okay, but now we have this Yael person who is coming in. Hello. There we are. Oh, look at that. I already forgot about the other part of about Deborah's characteristic. That's why it would really be helpful if it was showing me all of the slides. So Deborah, we said, also was a judge. Just a reminder, what do judges do? The shoftim in the ancient Israel, they adjudicate cases that are brought. They handle civil and criminal cases. It is a non-hereditary position. It's not like a king. And they have authority only because of the consent of the governed. If the people don't listen to the judge, then the people don't listen to the judge. The judge has no independent authority. They're no commanders of the army in order to force obedience. As you saw, she had to persuade Barak. She didn't get to do that just by saying, I'll have someone imprison you if you don't do it. And that's what a judge is like. And as we saw, she would sit under the palm, and they would come to her for judgment, showing that the people of Israel accepted her as the judge over them. Yael. Yael is the new woman in our story. Sisera has fled, thinking that Yael is the place to be because this is the house, this is the tent of somebody that is allied with his king, with Yavin. So he feels this is friendly territory. This is somewhere I can go. And he runs on foot to go there. Let's find out what she does. Just the start. So we're on verse 18 for those that are still reading along with me. So you have to imagine the scene. Sisera, his army has been destroyed. He has run off. He is scared for his life. He is tired, exhausted, panting, reaches the tent, and Yael comes out to meet Sisera and said to him, Do turn aside, my lord. Do turn aside to me. Do not be afraid. So he turned aside to her, to the tent, and she covered him with a blanket. He said to her, Now let me drink a little water, for I am thirsty. She opened a skin of milk, gave him drink, and covered him. Then he said to her, Stand at the entrance of the to the tent, and let it be, if anyone comes and asks you and says, is anyone here? You are to say, none. Okay, what can we get from this interchange about Yael? Well, we can see that she is motherly, right? She is there nurturing. She is there as a symbol of healing, of giving him support and succor in his hour of need. And she is the homemaker. She is coming out of the tent, right? That is the ultimate image of domesticity. And indeed, we'll find in chapter 5, she is even praised as from among the women in the tents, may she be blessed. This is her great catchphrase of her glory. But that's not entirely her whole nature, because she also has an element of sexuality to her, of sensualness to her, when you read this through the lens of the ancient Hebrew. Right? She is inviting. How forward of him. Come in to me. Turn aside to me. Do not be afraid. She is seductive. She is enveloping. She covers him with a blanket. She leads him to a place of rest. These are all things that are repeated over and over in the story. And in case that's not direct enough, we're going to find out later, she pounded Sisera, smashed his head, she shattered and passed it through his temple. Between her legs he bent down. He fell, he lay, between her legs he bent down. He fell where he bent down, there he fell ravaged. This is as close to overt as you get in biblical poetry. And indeed, among many of the commentaries, there are those who suspect that his and Yael's moments together were not just spent over a skin of milk, but that they were intimate. How can we say that? Well, let's look at the full behavior, and then we might be able to understand. So we're back at 21. Then Yael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg and put a hammer in her hand, and came to him silently, and thrust the peg into his temple, so that it went down into the ground. Now he had been sound asleep, for he was weary, and he died. Why was he so sleepy?
Because he had been running.
Because he had been running from fighting the battle? Anything else? What'd she give him to drink? Milk. Right? No refrigeration, people. There's no such thing except warm milk. Right? What did he ask to drink? Water. Right? This is a very cunning person. Right? She gave him milk in order to help him sleep. And again, if we're going to go down the line of the Midrash, when else do men quickly roll over and go to sleep? Okay? Right. So he is sound asleep, something that is emphasized in the text. And so she is able to stealthily come up and take this tent peg and hammer and wham. Right? And I'm afraid I don't have a clear picture of that, but he's lying on the ground. The nail goes against the side of his head and the hammer, and he's dead. We got the picture? Oh, yeah, it is very dramatic, very dramatic. And just to finish off chapter 4 here, now, verse 22, now here Barak was pursuing Sisera. He finally caught up. And Yael came out to meet him and said to him, "Come, I will show you the man whom you are seeking." He came to her, and here was Sisera fallen dead, with the peg in his temple. So that day God humbled Yavin, king of Canaan, before the children of Israel, and the hand of the children of Israel went harder and harder against Yavin, king of Canaan, until they had completely cut off Yavin, king of Canaan. Okay, so we seem to have some very clear pictures. We have Devorah as prophet and judge. We have Yael as being mother and, I wouldn't exactly call it lover, but somebody who is operating in that other womanly sphere. It all seems very cut and dry. It's very simple and what we would expect. But it isn't. Both Devorah, who is representing some of the hard power that women have, also has soft elements to her. And so we will see Yael as well is more of a mixture. Devorah The hard side, prophet, judge, war leader, dismissive of weak men. She is a strong woman in a classical sense, but she is also called, in the poetic side of chapter 5, until you arose, Devorah, you arose a mother of Israel. She is called the mother, not Yael. She is the mother of Israel. And we see that Devorah will sing. We see that Devorah will open up her voice to give praise, much like Miriam had done, and one of the reasons why this was chosen as the haftarah that goes along with Bishalach when we sing the Song of the Sea that was sung by Miriam. We also see that Devorah, for all of her so-called hard power, she never lifts a spear. She never throws a rock. She never carries a sword. She is still in that classical role of the woman, not engaging directly in armed conflict. So she is a little softer than it seems. She is not a hard, chiseled granite woman. She is a mixture of both hard and soft. Yael too. Yes, she has her hospitality. She has her milk. She has her blanket. Maybe cookies. And she is that classic housewife image, and with a little sensuality thrown in. But she also has a very hard edge, right? The general in her hands has been reduced to a child, right? She's tucking him in. She's covering him with a blanket after having given him a little milk to drink. He's a baby to her. He lies ravaged at her feet. Remember what we said from the Security Council resolution. It is usually women that are ravaged by the warriors. And here the warrior has been ravaged by a woman. Right? She has completely flipped the tables. And she has done it with real weapons in her hand, but beautifully the weapons of the home. She has taken the tools from which you build your home, the tent peg and hammer. That is what you set up your tent in, which for many people in the ancient world, the tent was their home. It wasn't a camping thing. That was where you lived. So she has literally taken the bricks of her home and used them to kill this enemy. It is a very, very powerful and very hard metaphor for her strength. But there's one more woman we have to talk about. But we're going to have to put her on hold. Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is going to tell us the story, but this time in poetic form. I'm afraid that my poetic voice is not much different than my prose voice, but hopefully you'll get the idea of how this would have felt to our ancient people. And Devorah sang along with Barak son of Abinoam on that day, saying, when war-loosened hair is loosened Israel, when fighting people present themselves, bless the Lord. Hearken, O kings, give ear, O princes, to the Lord I will sing. I will give praise to the Lord, the God of Israel. The Lord, in your going out from Seir, in your striding forth from the steps of Edom. The earth quaked, the heavens too dripped, the clouds dripped water. The mountains shook before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. The metaphors here, especially emphasizing the unstableness of the ground and the dripping of the heavens, is most likely a reference to the idea that the chariots that came out to fight us at Wadi Kishon, at the river of Kishon, were most likely caught in the unseasonably unsteady mud of the riverbanks. And that is what made them so easy to be defeated. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anat, he came before Devorah. In the days of Yael, caravans ceased. Those who walked on roads walked on twisting paths. It was dangerous. People didn't want to travel the main roads. The villagers ceased. They ceased in Israel until you arose, Devorah. You arose a mother in Israel. He chose new gods. Then there was battle in the gates. Was shield seen or spear among 40,000 in Israel? Meaning we were weak as warriors. My heart was toward the decree makers in Israel, those presenting themselves among the people. Bless the Lord. O those who ride on white she-asses, those who sit on cloths, those who walk on the way report it. At the sound of the trumpets by the water drawers, there they retell the righteous acts of the Lord, the righteous acts for his villagers in Israel. Basically meaning everyone should publicize this story of Deborah. Bestir yourself. Speak forth a song arise. Barak and capture your captives. O son of Abinoam, Then the remnant went down against the powerful. The fighting people of the Lord went down for me against the mighty. From Ephraim their root and Amalek after you. Benjamin among your people. From Machir the decree makers went down. From Zebulun the leaders with the census counterstaff. Rulers in Yissachar beside went down. And from Zebulun leaders with the census counterstaff. Rulers in Yissachar beside, Rulers in Yissachar beside Devorah, as Yissachar, so Barak in the valley sent out behind him. In the tribal divisions of Reuben was great soul searching. Why did you sit between the sheepfolds, hearkening to whistling for flocks? At the tribal divisions of Reuben was great, soul searching. In Gilad across the Jordan he dwelt. And Dan, why did he sojourn in his ships? Asher sat by the shore of the sea. By his landing places he dwelt. Zebulun, a people risking life amid dying. Naphtali, upon the risen terraces of the field. So, if you weren't following all of that, I'm not going to go into it, but it's dealing with the rivalry and the lack of agreement among the different tribes. So when the call went out to fight, not everyone showed up. A lot of the other tribes went, well, you know, Hatzor, Yavin, he's on the other side of the country from me. You go fight him. We're going to sit where we are with our sheep. We're going to sit where we are with our ships. We're not going to come to help you fight your enemy. And indeed, this was a symptom of the Israelites in this time period. They did not fight as one. It took all the way until King Saul, and then even more with King David, before we were truly unified. Kings came. They waged battle. Then they waged battle, the kings of Canaan at Tanakh by Megiddo's water. Profit of silver, they took none. Meaning all the people who came to fight us thinking they were going to loot us, they went away not only empty-handed, but dead. From the heavens, the stars waged battle. From their courses, they waged battle with Sisera. Most like the idea from their courses, the stars were used as the celestial calendar. It's where astrology eventually came from. You knew when the rains were likely to come in certain seasons based upon which constellations were rising when. That told you what month you were in and what to expect. It was an early Falmer's almanac. When the stars move from their courses, what this is likely referring to is that the rains came at the unexpected time. That the stars did not seem to be on the side of Sisera. Instead, they let the rain come when it wasn't supposed to, which is why we won. Because, as we know, the Wadi Kishon swept away, the ancient Wadi, the Wadi Kishon. May my being bless them with strength. Then the horses' hooves pounded from the dashing of their war steeds. Doomed by Meroz, says the Lord's messenger. Doomed, yes, doomed by her settled folk, because they did not come to help of the Lord, to the help of the Lord among the mighty. And now we hear about Yael. May she be blessed among women. Yael, among women in the tents may she be blessed. Water he asked for, milk she gave. In a bowl for the valiant she brought near cream. Her hand to the peg she stretched out, her right hand to the workman's pounder. She pounded Sisera, smashed his head, she shattered and passed it through his temple. Between her legs he bent down. He fell, he lay. Between her legs he bent down. He fell. Where he bent down, there he fell, ravaged. Our story so far. But this other woman, who we haven't heard yet. Through the window she peered. Sisera's mother wailed through the lattice. For what reason comes his chariot shamefully late? For what reason are the beats of his chariots tardy? What's her question? Sisera's mom? Where's my son? Right? I mean, he's the general of the army, so it's not like he's a 10-year-old, late for supper. But still, mothers are always mothers. And her boy went off to battle, and he hasn't come back yet. What's taking so long? He just had to kill a few Israelites. Why is he so late? Now, we, the reader, we know why he is late. Because he's dead. He's been staked to the ground. But the wisest of her attendants gives answer. Yes, she sends back her the words to her. Are they not dividing spoils? Alas, 2 lasses for each warrior chief. Spoils of dyed cloth has Sisera, spoils of dyed embroidered cloth. Dyed tunics embroidered at the neck, he is taking as spoils. So the answer to try and calm Sisera's mother is, don't worry. The only reason he's late is because he's pillaging and raping so much. It's fine. That was meant to be words of comfort of why her son would be so late from the battle. It just went so well, he just needed more time to collect the goods. So perish all your enemies, O Lord, but let those who love you be like the emergence of the sun in its might. And the land was quiet for 40 years. So what do we learn from Sisera's mother? She is forlorn. This image of the women looking out behind the lattice work has been found in ancient artwork all over the ancient Near East. They have found carvings of the woman peering through the lattice, of looking outwards. It's almost a sign, in some cases, that is associated with some of the ancient idols and gods, or goddesses in particular. And so the idea of Sisera's mother looking out behind this lattice may have not only been a little bit of a coy irony about what she was looking for, but it may have also been a finger in the eye of the ancient idols, of saying, your women god looking behind the lattice out, they are going to find only destruction, because God is set against these false deities. But God is also set against what they are hoping for. Because where it says that he is looking for a lass, or he is looking for lasses, the word that is used there is the same Hebrew word that is used for the womb. And if you are familiar with American slang, or indeed just about any slang anywhere in the world, if you call a woman by a piece of her reproductive anatomy, usually that is considered a rather offensive term. So when she says, oh, he's just picking up a little bit of insert slur, that was what was expected, right? Women would wait, and the men would go out, and they would find another bit of something, and they would drag her home. That was the expectation of the Canaanite women of how things went. But what do we know about how the women on the side of Israel do things? Right? Are women on the side of Israel just a womb? Right? Is that's all they are? No. They are strong. They are a prophet. They are a judge. They are, even in the most domestic and sensual of cases, able to kill the greatest enemy, the greatest general of the opposition. Right? Those are the women who are there. And that is why both Sisera and Yavin didn't recognize the threat that they were facing from Devorah and Yael, because they had the wrong definition. That is to say, Yavin, the Canaanites, had the wrong definition of womanhood. The words of Sisera's mother explain the prophecy at the beginning. Right? This wasn't just an admonishment to Barak, who feared to go without his mother, Devorah, the mother of Israel, who didn't want to go to battle, but instead made his mother go with him, and Sisera's mother stayed home. Instead, as Sisera sought weak women to make his slaves, he was brought down by the most domestic of women, but women who had strength that he failed to see. And that was something that Devorah had to make clear to Barak as well. Because there is a tendency for men who are existing in positions of authority or power to often think that they are somehow stronger and better than women. To this very day, yes. Hopefully not in this room, but culturally it is a tendency to have one type of power be thought of as being representative of proper authority and social balance. So yes, the men in the ancient world, absolutely, if you're wielding bronze armor or trying to manhandle an iron chariot, you're going to need upper body strength, which on average was the male prerogative. But does that mean that only men had authority to lead? That only men had the authority to see God? That only men had the authority to give judgment? No. Does that mean only men could fight? That only men were responsible for the safety of home? No. Devorah and Yael smash that. They instead give us a full picture, right? These chapters show the full nature of the female characters. In doing so, they teach the reader that women, like men, do not fit into neat stereotypes. Some women are teachers and judges and leaders. Some women are housewives and warriors. Some women, like Sisera's mother, are rapacious and cruel. Women are complicated. Women are nuanced, and they are so just as men. Men too. Not that we have time to go into it, but when you look into the story from Sisera and from Barak's point of view, if you look at how they act, they too are breaking some of the stereotypes of men. Barak being willing to go and follow a woman. Barak, in fact, hoping that she would come with him. There's much more to be said about that and the role of the men, not just in this story, but throughout the Bible. But for today, I hope that at least gives you a little bit more depth, a little bit more meat, to understand that the characters throughout the Tanakh, and the women especially, should never be taken just at surface value, and that you have to see that these characters are incredibly robust, incredibly deep, and very powerful. Thank you. Before I put down the mic, does anyone have any questions?
I have a question, but I have a comment. Well, two really. One, I thought it was really pretty, a pretty great juxtaposition that we talked so much about these iron chariots, and he's brought down by a tent in a hammer.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't all this armament did not protect him from a well-run woman's house.
And that is all throughout the Tanakh, that all of the weaponry of mighty nations is nothing compared to being on the side of God. That if you're doing justice, if you're bringing righteousness, if you're establishing the world in peace and the way God wants in the Torah, then yeah, the chariots, they'll fall.
And the other thing that hit me was as we flipped to the poetry side and the description of Devorah as a leader and a mother in Israel reminded me of Golda.
Golda Meir, yes.
She had that same, she didn't come up through the ranks of the military, but she had the respect and it just brought her to mind.
And too, even though she didn't fight on the front lines, she brought her country through one of its worst wars. Very true. Very true.